Empowered by the Spirit, Peter gave his first sermon, and 3,000 hearts were transformed. Hearing, receiving, and repenting, the young church walked in unity and garnered praise. Peter and John then continued to spread the gospel through preaching and miracles, and the church grew by 5,000. In AD 31, Stephen gave a powerful sermon, and the enraged crowd stoned him, making him the first Christian martyr. Around AD 34, on the road to Damascus, the Lord transformed the heart of Saul, a man who persecuted countless Christians, and Saul became Paul. In AD 44, King Herod Agrippa I executed the Apostle James and had Peter arrested, but an angel rescued Peter, leading him out of the prison. As the believers were scattered because of persecution, the center of operations for Christianity turned from Jerusalem to Antioch, where Paul and Barnabas were sent out on their first missionary journey. On his final missionary journey, Paul traveled through Galatia, Phrygia, and Ephesus, encouraging the disciples in the cities. He then spent 3 months in Greece before traveling to Jerusalem, where he was arrested. Paul is then sent to Rome for trial, but the ship wrecks on the island of Malta. When he finally arrived in Rome, he lived there for 2 years before Nero ordered his beheading. After 28 chapters, the story of Acts comes to an end, yet the story of the gospel didn't stop there. Out of joy, the church multiplied. In AD 80, Christianity spread further to the countries of France and Tunisia. 20 years later, the first Christians were reported in Algeria and Sri Lanka. By AD 150, the gospel reached Portugal and Morocco. Christianity found its way to Austria in AD 174, followed by Switzerland and Belgium. In AD 328, the gospel reaches Ethiopia. Almost 200 years later, Pope Gregory I sent Augustine of Canterbury and a team of missionaries to present-day England, and within the first year they baptized 10,000 people. In AD 635, the first Christian missionaries arrive in China. In 740, Irish monks bring the gospel to Iceland, but it wasn't until AD 900 that missionaries reached the country of Norway. Out of joy, the church multiplied. By 1200, the Bible was available in 22 languages. In 1491, missionaries arrive in the African Congo, with the first church located in Angola. A few years later, Kenya reports its first known believers. Meanwhile, in Spain, Pope Alexander VI wanted to send Catholic missions to the New World. As a result, Christopher Columbus took priests with him on his second journey to the Americas. In 1531, Franciscan Juan de Padilla started his missions work in Mexico City. By 1550, John Calvin sent French Protestants to reach the people of Brazil. In 1640, Jesuit missionaries finally reached the Caribbean, landing on the island of Martinique. Out of joy, the church multiplied. The early 1700s saw the rise of the Great Awakening in America, where both George Whitefield and Jonathan Edwards stirred revival throughout the colonies. On January 1st, 1901, students at Bethel Bible College in Topeka, Kansas are baptized in the Holy Spirit, and the modern-day Pentecostal movement is started. 1914, the founding fathers and mothers of the Assemblies of God meet in Hot Springs, Arkansas, to promote unity and doctrinal stability. In the 1920s, after a series of cottage prayer meetings, Pittsburgh, Kansas launches First Assembly of God, birthed at 607 North Joplin. With leadership approval in 1993, Family Life Assembly of God Church starts. They meet in rented facilities, starting at Memorial Auditorium, eventually meeting on Highway 69. Land is purchased on North Rouse. In the year 2000, Pastors Mark and Sarah Lehman arrive in Pittsburgh. In 2001, Flag Church moves forward, breaking ground on the North Rouse property. On December 7th, 2003, they hold their last service in the rented facility, and they dedicate the facility in February of 2004. A second service on Sunday is added in October. In 2007, a Kids Zone building is dedicated, and a third Sunday morning service is added, and more land is purchased. Funds are starting to be raised in early 2010, and the congregation is bursting at the seams. Ground is broken on a worship center in 2011, and by 2012, the facility is finished. Flag Church goes back to holding only 2 services, And after a joyous dedication, a few months later, they go back to holding 3 Sunday morning services. In 2016, Flag Church continues to move forward, building vertical and horizontal relationships. Church, this morning, can you say this out loud with me? Here we go. I love my church. Can we give it up for Jesus this morning? Check 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're good. All right. When you think about the history of the church, it's just about unexplainable. If you have your bulletins, you can go ahead and pull them out this morning. But the existence of the church is pretty unexplainable. Not just Flag Church, any church. From a secular viewpoint, think about this. A small band of Jewish dissidents decide that they're going to come together. They're led by people that are based not on belief. They didn't come together as a church because of what they believed, but because of what they saw, what they experienced, a resurrection. They were eyewitnesses. So they defy a superpower, Rome, and a 1,000-year-old religious system. They defy that religious system, and they prevail. And at the center of a movement is this Jewish carpenter guy, whose kingdom wasn't made of things you could touch. He spoke mostly in stories that very few people actually understood. He insisted that people love the Romans, and he insisted that they pay the Romans taxes. How do you think that could start today if a new political candidate came out and said, we're going to raise taxes? Do you think he'd get a large following? This church, this Jesus, alienated the influential. He alienated the powerful, and he offended just about everybody. And his family kind of thought he was a little crazy. 3 years of public speaking, Jesus is arrested, publicly humiliated, and then executed. And after his execution, Jesus' dispirited and desperate followers claim that he rose from the dead. And within weeks, there's hundreds of people within walking distance that believe this nonsense, that this guy has risen from the dead. And Jerusalem is eventually filled with followers of this thing they call the Way. There's resistance from Rome. There's resistance from Jewish authorities. The members of this church are executed and scattered. Yet in a short time, this Jewish knockoff religion that we now call Christianity replaces the entire pagan pantheon that crucified its leader. That's unexplainable. Hollywood would not buy the story of the church because it's too unrealistic. It's more realistic that a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away that there was an evil Sith empire like a Star Wars thing. That's more realistic. Rocky Balboa is more realistic and explainable than how the church made it out of the first century. So as you're going along in your notes this morning, the existence of the church is unexplainable. And the existence of the church is undeniable. It's undeniable. 1/3 of the world's population claims some kind of faith in Jesus. 1/3. The Roman Empire, long gone. Long gone. Ancient Judaism disappeared basically in AD 70 when the temple was destroyed. Jesus taught for 3 years. 1, 2, 3. And 2,000 years later is worshipped on every continent. How do you explain that? How do you explain that? Jesus simply said, hey, I'm going to build my church, and the gates and the powers and the wisdom of hell are not going to overcome it. Oh, they're going to attack it. And we'll look at that in a couple messages later. But they're going to attack it. They're going to try and destroy it. They're going to try and tear it down. My words are going to be written down. Jesus left no written word. Other people wrote his words down. He wrote nothing. The only thing we have an example of what Jesus wrote is when he bent down and wrote in the dirt one time. He left no written word, yet his words are known by more people around the planet than anything else. How do you explain that? How do you explain that? It's unexplainable. Every August, I know August is probably the most hated month in the calendar in the Midwest because of the heat and because of the humidity. But every August we do and back to school for those that get their summer off from school and are headed back. But every August we do a series on vision. 10, 15 years ago I just did one message, but we do a series on vision, state of the church. Where are we? Where are we going? Where are we headed? And if you've been at Flag forever, this could be an opportunity for review or remind, but also to reignite and to re-inspire why we actually do what we do, why we're going the direction that we're going. I'll give you one example. Jesse Hudson. You saw it on the screen already this morning when Sarah was giving us the rejoice things that we're rejoicing over. Why we do what we do and why we're going the direction that we're going. Absolutely. So you may be someone that's been here before and you've heard some of what I'm going to say, although I'm not coming off old notes. But Nehemiah had to remind him after 29 days, hey, let's get back on vision. Here's what we're about. But if you're new to Flag, and I know 8:30 service doesn't have as many that are quote-unquote new to Flag, but can I just tell you that we've had a ton of visitors the past 3 weeks, especially in the 10 o'clock and the 11:30 service. I mean, was it 10 o'clock or 11:30 service? Jeremy Johnson, put your hand up real quick. That entire row was filled with people that have never been here before. Entire row. So we've been giving out cookies like crazy, man. So if you're new, this is a great time. This next 3 weeks, today and the next 2 weeks, is a great time to get clued in, especially if you're church shopping, before you decide, I don't know if I want to commit at this church. I don't know if I want to really connect. This next 3 weeks, after these 3 weeks, if you don't know if you want to clue in or connect, then you need to find some other place that you want to clue in and connect to, because you're going to have to know everything about what we're doing and why we're doing it. So the next Sunday, we'll do parts 2 and 3 about what we value, our core values. But let's talk about church, because I love the church, not just this church. I love the church, capital C church, which is why that video took us all the way back to AD 30. Church is not a building you go to. This version of a local church owns a building, but church isn't a building you go to. It's a family you belong to. That's why the other week, Nick and Rachel Steffen were back from China. They're a college couple that attended our church. They came to Pittsburgh knowing just about nobody. That would have been probably about 4 or 5 years ago. They knew just about nobody, but I knew Rachel was high quality and of good character because she is an Ohio State Buckeye fan. So that, man, as soon as I saw that, I was like, girl. They came back from China. They were back just for a short time, but one of the things they had to do, and he had to explain to his birth family why he was leaving them in Abilene to come down here for a Thursday night life group. Because some of them feel closer than family. Because that kind of relationship, that kind of connection. Church is not a building you go to. It's a family you belong to. And if you want to be in the spot where, hey, just leave me alone. Maybe you're one of those people that go use the self-checkout at Walmart because you want to be left alone. It's like, I'm not checking out myself because it's quicker. I just don't want anyone to talk to me. Church is the wrong place. There was an article in the Wichita newspaper before we left town in Wichita that someone was writing about what they hate about church, and someone said, everyone's trying to talk to me and be nice to me. I just want to be left alone. Well, can you imagine a church that was built around that kind of theme and vision? Hey, Flag Church, the church where nobody talks to you. Flag Church, we'll leave you alone. Now, some people are going, I'd like that. Does that help them move forward in their life? Does that help them dig deeper into despair and depression? I'm totally with you. There's some people in the church, I don't need hugging me 7 times, man. David Adams would send me to the chiropractor. Or some of the football players that we have come. That would be difficult. But when we're talking about church, and we'll be talking about Flag specifically, every church has the same mission. And we'll look over that in just a moment. The same mission. Covenant Harvest is the same mission as First Naz, as Trinity Baptist, as Countryside. The same mission. Jesus gave the mission. It's the mission Jesus gave. We'll look at those scriptures in a moment. But vision. How do you carry it out? What's your methodology? What's your structure? What are you aiming towards? Many of you have been to many different kinds of churches, and this isn't the only way to go ahead and try and reach people the way that we happen to do it. Some churches today are reaching people, and the pastor's got a robe on. You don't even know if he's wearing pants or shorts underneath. You don't want to know. Don't go there. You go into some church. There's some churches that are reaching people and doing great things for God, and there is no bringing a drink in the sanctuary. Is that right or wrong? That's not really for me to decide. That's not the church I lead. That's not the church I attend. We got a missionary guest with us from Lome, Togo, Mark Alexander. I guarantee they do church a little differently in Togo. They probably don't get 3 services done in a span of 5 hours on a Sunday morning. Now, they probably don't do that there. Ivory Coast, they got 1 service in 4.5 hours. What's the right way? There's plenty of ways to do church. The key is not what's right or wrong. The key is what's effective for reaching the mission that the founder gave us, and what's ineffective that needs to be said no to simply because it's not pleasing the founder of the mission. So this won't be a shocker to you if you looked at your notes in terms of what the fill in the blanks are here. I'm not trying to shock you. I'm not trying to trip you up. I'm trying to be very clear, not trying to be profound. We exist to build vertical and horizontal relationships. That's why we exist. If we're not doing that, let's just sell everything and give it to a missionary and send them the money. Let's go home and let's watch the Olympics. Go USA. Jesus said it very plainly and clearly. And I love it because he was answering a question. So it wasn't just, hey, listen up, I want to say this. No, he was answering a question. Hearing that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, who would have been like the Democrats versus the Pharisees being the Republicans, the Pharisees got together. They're kind of on the same team, Pharisees and Sadducees, but they didn't necessarily always get along. One of them, an expert in the law, tested him with this question: Teacher, what's the greatest commandment in the law? Which would have been something they would have argued about on a regular basis to say, well, no, this one's more important because I keep this one. That one's not that important because I don't keep that one. No. So they ask him that, and Jesus says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. How do we transfer that to how we're trying to operate as a church? Let's get people connected to God. Let's get them connected to Christ. No hidden agenda, and it's not a hidden agenda. When we are giving out hot dogs at the Pitt State games, when we are giving out bottles of water at Little Balkans Days, when we are giving out backpacks, no hidden agenda. We want to get people connected to Christ. Not trying to hide it, and if we go somewhere, I tell them straight up, this is what our goal is. Now, we're not going to sit here and say, get on your knees right now and pray. No. Sometimes it takes some pre-evangelism, especially in our culture. But that's exactly what the goal is. And the second commandment, Jesus said, is like it, which is crazy because the guy didn't ask what the second commandment was. He asked him, what is the best football team in the NFL? He did not say what was number 1 and 2. He said, what is the best? And Jesus says, hey, let me tell you the first one, but the second is just like it. It's pretty much equal. They're tied. They're co-importance. Co-importance. Love your neighbor as yourself. That's a hard one. It might be easier to love God because he doesn't get in our face anytime we fall short, but our neighbor might. All the law and prophets, everything you believe, Mr. Oldtimer that's asking me this question, everything you believe hangs on these 2 words, these 2 commandments. And then one other side verse that goes along with the idea of those relationships is this. Jesus said, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. The first passage I showed you is what most people would call the Great Commandment. This passage here is the Great Commission. Every church that's following Jesus has the same Great Commandment to follow. Every church that claims to be following Jesus has the same Great Commission to follow. How do we phrase that down so if we're sharing with people, we don't have to quote these verses verbatim? We want to build vertical and horizontal relationships. And building's hard. There's no instant. Some of you are old enough to remember, what was it? Was it Lipton Instant Tea? Man, that stuff was so nasty and gross. And then I understand they have instant coffee. I mean, if you want something disgusting to drink, just go get some sewage water. Why would you actually want to make instant coffee? It's like, oh, nasty. We got all this instant stuff. Now, instant Kool-Aid, I'm all over that. That sounds like fun. If someone makes instant Diet Dr. Pepper, I'm going to be buying that and packing that stuff. That sounds good. There's no instant in the build. Well, which one's more important? Well, let's back up for a moment. Which one's more important according to Jesus? The second's just like it. It's just like it, but even Jesus can only say one truth at a time. Is it more important that we get people connected to Christ? Oh, yes, it is. Okay. Will they stay connected to Christ if they don't get connected to other people? Can we even love Christ if we don't love other people? According to the Scriptures, no. Because we're called to love one another, sing to one another, care for one another, do all this stuff for one another. The idea of I'm just going to go on a mountaintop and love Jesus and have a great vertical relationship doesn't make any sense because Jesus rarely did that himself, and when he did it was so he could get filled up and come down and pour himself out to others. What does the Scripture say? How can you say you love God if you can't even love that you cannot see? if you cannot love this brother or sister that you can see? So it's definitely both. So every Sunday as we're looking at it as your staff, what's a win? What's something where it's like, ching, ka-ching, that's exactly what we were aiming for. Yes, I'm so glad that happened. Is someone who was far from God closer? Pastor, how many people pray to receive Jesus today? I don't know sometimes. I don't know. But we had an individual that when they were sharing with me their salvation story, I had no idea they got saved that one day. But they knew. And there's fruit in their life. That's kind of the goal. Is someone who was far from God closer? Another win is someone who was far from people, who was alienated, who was disconnected, who was depressed, who was unattached. Do they feel closer to other people now? I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, and please don't, because I don't want to embarrass you. For some of you, this is the only place you get a smile all week. Now, that breaks my heart, but it also makes me happy that you're coming, and that's something you're getting here. This is the only place you get a smile. This is the only place you get a handshake, and you're going, I think they actually care. Not sure about my boss, not sure about this, not sure about this family member, but someone actually cares about me here. And they bother to know my name, and they listen to my story some. And that's what makes it a win. That's what makes it awesome. Is someone who's far from people closer. Because the person that's not connected to anybody, they're lonely, which our society, my goodness, we can be lonely in a crowded room. We can be lonely with 5,000 Facebook friends. They're lonely, they're disconnected, they're unattached, they're discouraged, they're depressed. You know what they're getting ready to do? Make the front page of the newspaper in a bad way. In a very bad way. Rarely do you see someone blowing up the paper or blowing up the news for doing bad stuff who has healthy relationships around them. Not perfect, but healthy. So whatever it takes short of sin to reach people. To reach people that no one else is reaching, this church may have to do what no one else is doing. It doesn't mean that because we're doing it it's good or it's right, but it's an experiment and we'll give it a shot. But if we refuse not to do whatever it takes, we'll eventually do nothing at all. And we'll just say, we tried. Let's just hold services that we like and see who God draws in. And that's not what we're called to do. When the Great Commission becomes the Great Omission, we're no longer on mission. And we're called to be on mission and on vision. There's a daily email I get from a guy named Seth Godin. I don't expect that you know who he is. He's a short, brainiac guy that's got goofy glasses and no hair and is into marketing. He's trying to tell people who are salesmen and marketers, hey, here's how you need to think. Well, in one respect, I'm a salesman and a marketer because I'm trying to get people to realize that Jesus is who he says he is and he's worth listening to. He had an amazing quote I wanted to share with you this morning. Does this place exist to maintain and perpetuate the status quo, or am I here and you here to do the work the radical founder had in mind when we started? Because they didn't kill Jesus because he was a nice guy. They didn't kill him because they go, let's have tea, Jesus. No. They killed him because he was a threat. He was a threat to their status quo. Are we willing to go ahead and make sure the decisions that we're making and the ideas that we're chasing and the work that we're doing is to make sure we're accomplishing what a radical founder wanted, as opposed to, hey, what's going to make sure people don't leave? Hey, what's going to make sure that we can go ahead and not rock the boat? Or are we going to move forward? See, when you arrived here, I don't know when that was, but when you arrived here, we existed for you. And there's going to be people showing up today for the very first time. I know that. They told me yesterday that they were going to be for the very first Sunday. And you know what? It's not going to impress them if I remember their name or if I greet them. They expect me to. It'll blow them away if they see other people being friendly to them. It'll blow them away if they see other people serving. It will blow them away when they walk in and they go, this feels like home. Because it's a place to be loved. A place to be loved. So what breaks our heart? I mean, you find out what you care about when you find what breaks your heart. In staff meeting this past Tuesday, we're going through all the cards. Every card you fill out, everyone on staff looks at every single one of those. Every one. And a name popped up. I'm going, hey, I don't know who this person is. Anybody know this name? And then when we went through our reports, which show us, because we're shepherds and we care for people, hey, who's been coming for a long time and we haven't seen for a while because we care. And who's just started coming that we need to make sure we have an idea, and someone on this staff needs to know their face and their name. I mean, if it's a 7-year-old, it's probably Pastor Marissa. If it's someone else, maybe someone needs to know him. And we looked in the records, and this person had been here 5 straight Sundays. And no one at the table knew her name or face. So we just stopped. This is our staff meeting. We meet in nursery 3 and 4. We just stopped. Said, hold on. Let's see if we can figure this out. And so we stalked her on Facebook. We did. We will go to the ends of the internet to put your name and your face in our hearts. And we now know who Jackie James is. And when she walks in today, I'm going to be called her by name. And it's not because I have a supernatural gift of the Spirit for names. It's because that's the mission and the vision that we're on. And that's why it matters. And you know why she even came the very first time? Probably because she came with her friend, Shay Berger. You know where Shay's husband is right now? Up in the booth serving. Up in the booth serving. So where are we headed? We're trying to reach 1,000 people. That's why when you see that I love my church, that's why the M's in the heart is around the M, because we're trying to reach 1,000 people. In Roman numerals, M means 1,000. Pastor, seriously, this is Pittsburgh, Kansas. There's only 20,000 people in town. Do you really think you're going to get 5% of the entire congregation, entire town coming to one church? Is that even doable? With God, all things are possible. Really? I mean, seriously, are all things possible? Could the Browns win the Super Bowl this year? Is there anyone that thinks the Browns can win the Super Bowl? Thank you, one Ohio guy. Yeah, John. But really? No. It's not going to happen. But we can move towards it. I mean, when I told people I wanted to pastor 1,000 people when I came in 2000, when there was that real fat picture of me on the screen a little bit ago, oh, no way, there's only 30 people there, and you took it down 25 in a week. What if I told you that a church has already reached 1,000 people in Pittsburgh, Kansas? You'd probably go first go, oh, Catholic Church. I go, no, we're not talking about that. It's kind of a different entity altogether in itself. Social, religious, structural, ethnic, everything there. What if I showed you a picture and showed you that a church in Pittsburgh, Kansas already had 1,000 people in attendance? Can we bring the house lights down so they can see this picture, please? And Zeke, you can bring your team up. Just kill the house lights for a moment. Thanks. You can't read the writing on the side, so let me turn that for you. First Methodist Episcopal Church. Yeah, that's a unique combination. It's like having a burger McDonald's. Sunday school. April 11th, 1912. That was Easter. 1,136 people present. Where is that? Where is that? Well, that's Our Lady of Lourdes' steeple right there. This building doesn't stand anymore. But I'd be really surprised if there's not at least one person in this room that has at least one relative in that photo, even if you don't know who they are. How bad do they want to get there? There's one dude up in a tree. Whatever it stinking takes, huh? Whatever it takes. So how do you get to 1,000 people? One story at a time. Because every number's got a name. Every name's got a story. And every story matters to God. Would you stand with me this morning? Lord, we thank you for your church. It's your church. We thank you that we get to be part of this one that we call our church. And we ask that right now you would fill this building with your presence so your church, this body, can enjoy you.